Well, I'm really delighted today to be speaking to Dr. Rufaro Mucheka, who is a business development consultant with Jersey Finance here in Johannesburg. Welcome, Rufaro.
Thank you, David.
So we're here today at the Radisson Blu in Sandton, where we're setting up for a dinner event tonight that Jersey Finance are sponsoring. We've done a lot of planning together to make sure this event came about in the right way. Are you excited about the dinner tonight?
To be honest, for me, because it's the first PCD event in Johannesburg, and you working with me, it was really an opportunity just to show you a little bit about Johannesburg, and actually, especially around the experts and contacts that are in Johannesburg, and that can really make the dinner, come alive.
Fantastic. And for those who've not had the chance to meet you, perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about your role at Jersey Finance.
Yeah, maybe before I even go into my role, maybe just who I am. I am Rufaro, like you've rightly said, and I've been in the financial services industry for about 22 years, working in one of the big four banks. And the last 5 years, I was in West Africa, where I was involved in setting up a wealth management business. So my experience on the continent is really quite great and huge. And I've been with Jersey Finance now for about 1.5 years. And my role in Jersey Finance is to promote Jersey and represent Jersey. So I work very closely with the Jersey government, as well as the financial services industry in Jersey, in promoting the services and also how Jersey can really help Africa and especially South Africa in its development.
Fantastic. And you've got an exciting couple of weeks now where you've been joined by Alan Wood and other colleagues. Yeah. You've got a big roadshow planned. Perhaps you could talk us through some of the key events here in Johannesburg and as well next week in Cape Town.
To be honest, I said to myself, you know what, this is what some people call baptism of fire. But on the other hand, because literally we have got about 9 events in about 2 weeks. And so initially it was like, how are we going to do it? But I think for me, from a planning perspective, I think we've done quite well. So in summary, we actually have, got the 2 funds events. We actually the first one this morning. So there's one in Johannesburg, one in Cape Town. We also have another event, Future Proofing Wealth, which we also have one in Johannesburg, one in Cape Town. The Johannesburg one is going to take place tomorrow. And we are definitely going to have a dinner with you tonight. And I'm looking forward to it, especially the Johannesburg one, because we need to make sure that we look proper for the event. And so we also have another one in Cape Town. And we also have some events with STEP South Africa. And if you look at STEP, it's, Society for Estate and Trust Practitioners. And in South Africa, it's really growing. And if you look at Jersey has the largest STEP chapter in the world with more than 1,100 members. So having an event with STEP South Africa, both in Johannesburg and Cape Town, it's also really a platform to really talk about, when it comes to offshore structuring, how it works, and a whole lot of that other stuff. And the last event is actually the Super Return in Cape Town. So we are going to leave Johannesburg on Wednesday, and we've been in Cape Town for almost 1.5 weeks, making sure that, every day is going to count. So we are really excited about the events.
Fantastic. And for some of the audiences for that content, on the funds side, do you get fund managers coming, people setting up new funds, people looking at the existing funds landscape? What sort of audience do you tend to engage with that content? Yeah,
so if you look at the funds event, like the one, we had one today, it's really funds focus on South Africa. And it really focuses on South African fund managers or even those that are involved in structuring funds and why Jersey is well placed to be able to play that role. So if I look at even the panel discussion this morning, which definitely is going to be the same in Cape Town, it's really about why Jersey for funds. We are well placed, when it comes to those that are targeting to raise funds, let's say in the UK and Europe. Jersey is well placed and why. So that's more or less what it is. And then the other event, especially the private wealth event, we actually have 2 panel discussions. And one really focuses on onshore and offshore, trusts from a structuring perspective, and also The other one is really around your sustainability, family offices, and impact, because those are topics that are becoming quite huge, especially on the continent, in terms of whatever investment that people do, what impact are they making?
Interesting. So on the private wealth side then, are more South African families talking more actively about ESG and impact portfolios, do you think, in the structuring options therein?
I think they are, because if you look at from a South African perspective, where you find that there are lots of South African companies, for example, that have expanded a lot onto the continent. So you find South Africa has got a lot of this expertise, which has helped a lot of these companies really expand and be able to unlock opportunities on the continent. So yes, going back to family offices, what we find more and more is a lot of South African firms or family offices, they set up in Jersey, but because in the long term, when they make money, they always want to come back and make a difference on the continent. So you find that there are so many of those family offices set up offshore, but because there's a lot of how are we making an impact, we know where we come from, they are coming back onto the continent and really try to invest in areas where they can really make a difference.
And on that intra-Africa trade point, I mean, do you see interaction between South Africa and Kenya, Nigeria, and the other kind of leading economies?
Yeah.
How do you see that developing and unfolding?
So one of the, I don't even want to say one of the areas. If I look at in my PhD studies, I was studying about, South African companies that expand onto the continent. How do they do it? Some succeed, some better. But what my experiences have been on the continent were that, in a lot of these countries, South African companies to do well, they tend to go into partnerships. So if you look at, let's say, South African companies, let's say setting up in Nigeria, it's much easier when one has got a local partner, because the local partner understands the nuances much better. And it's much easier for you to set up, and run the business as compared to trying to go there and put your own flag. It's going to take a very long time, because a lot of information is not normally above the line. So the more one works with the local experts, the more it makes it much, much easier. So yes, so especially with a lot of these models that are more successful, you find that there are so many South African companies that work very closely, let's say, with your Kenyan companies, Nigeria, really across the continent, but depending on the areas that they are really focusing on.
And Jersey has a role there where these deals are being put together, these joint ventures, this cross-border investment. Yeah. Do you see as something that can be, there's an important role for you to play there, isn't there?
Yes, and especially if you look at why, going back to the, to, let's say, why we've got a roadshow, it's really saying, if you look at Jersey gives you a platform to be well structured so that you can operate even at a global level or at an African level. It makes it much easier to be able to deploy in so many geographies. So yes, Jersey plays a very, very big role. And for me, I think what's quite impressive is, if you look at more than 200 companies that are member firms for Jersey Finance, more than 40 of those actually travel and do business in Africa. And it's not just South Africa, it's really across Africa. So it makes it much easier when you've got a company which is set up in Jersey, does business across Africa, which means they understand the African way of thinking, of doing business. And they also even connect the dots. If now, let's say there's a company that is setting up in Jersey and maybe wanting to do business, let's say in South Africa and Kenya, like you've rightly said, it's nice when we have those leading companies that believe in Africa, the African opportunities, to actually be very involved in making sure that whatever is put together really works for, for those businesses in Africa.
And do you find that the Jersey proposition is well understood by clients, by business owners here, perhaps not the professionals who are schooled in a lot of the offshore jurisdictions and the international business? Do they know where it is? Do they associate certain things with it? What do you find when you talk to local entrepreneurs and business owners about Jersey here?
So the concept of setting offshore, I think it's known by many, it can be entrepreneurs or companies. But at times the question is where? Is it Jersey? Is it Mauritius? Is it, is it any other international finance center? So at least the concept is really well known. And I think where Jersey really comes back is where we share a lot of our case studies, where we've been very much involved, which kind of makes it much easier. And also, and where Jersey really comes in, it reminds me of the other, when I had our women's event, where I even had to show a map of Jersey to say, you know what, people tend to confuse New Jersey and our Jersey. So I tend to say, you know what, we are all Jersey. And because it's in the channel, it's between the UK and France, it basically means it's really well placed. If anybody is targeting, Europe or, the UK in terms of capital raising, Jersey is really well placed. So that's where, when it comes to the value proposition of Jersey, they now understand where Jersey really fits into the equation. And for me, what was quite interesting, which I even shared in the event this morning, was the South Africa Venture Capital Association report actually showed that whenever fund managers are raising capital outside Africa, I think it's a report that was done about 2 years ago, 67% is raised in UK and Europe together. And I'm saying, if you are raising capital in the UK and Europe, and Jersey is really right there in the middle, it means it makes sense for you to set up in Jersey.
Okay, fantastic. And tell us a little bit more about where you tend to spend your time. You're based here in Johannesburg. I imagine you go down to Cape Town a little bit, but where else do you tend to go within South Africa? And also, internationally, you've got a broader mandate to work with the Jersey finance colleagues across Africa as well. So how do you tend to break up your weeks and months?
Wow, that's quite interesting. So if you look at my main role, is really to connect, Jersey with where the opportunities are. That's basically what I do. So you find I make sure that in South Africa itself, whether it's the tax consultants, the fund managers, the private wealth managers, they do have a good understanding of what Jersey offers, so that if ever there's a need, they know where to go, and I can be able to connect them with the right people. Then, so I do attend a lot of events like South Africa Venture Capital Association. It can be STEP events. And at times I also create my own networking events, so that at least people can meet and, we can identify opportunities. But I also go to Jersey because it's also quite important for the financial services industry to understand the potential of Africa. So they need to have a very good understanding of the opportunities, let's say in South Africa, and even, across Africa in general. I also work very closely with my colleagues in the other jurisdictions. As you know, we have got offices in China, the UK and UAE. Yeah. So I work more, I think, especially with the UK, because if you look at immigration, for example, a lot of South Africans go to the UK. So it's quite important for me to work very closely with my counterparts, so that if you have those that are considering going to the UK, there are some member firms that can actually assist them when they go to the UK. So I work very closely with my counterpart there. I also work with my counterpart very closely, like the one in China, because you find China and Africa. We know that if you look at 20 years ago, I don't think China was as prominent in Africa as much as it is now. So you are starting to find a lot of, Chinese investors that are looking at Africa. So we work very closely when it comes to that. And I also work very closely with my colleague, Faisal, especially on the continent, because we want Africa to grow. So he focuses on Kenya as well as Nigeria. But we work very closely because what we also find is the member firms that focus on, let's say, South Africa, they also focus on, let's say, Kenya as well as Nigeria as well. So we need to make sure that whatever we do, we really connect the dots and make sure that, whatever information needs to be shared, they need the right people, the right conversations. And so it's a very exciting space.
Fantastic. Well, Rufaro, great to talk to you today. Really looking forward to having dinner tonight with you and our very special guests.
I am looking forward to my first dinner with you, and especially meeting all those that are coming to meet us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.